Hey guys, welcome back to DCS World. I'm Spudknocker, as always, and today we're going to take a look at a new technique that I have found by looking at manuals, looking at YouTube videos, GoPro videos of real Harrier pilots, manuals, all these kinds of places I can find to figure out a new technique to increase the survivability and the standoff distance of IRMAVs in the AV-8B. Now, I really love flying the Harrier, but I get killed a lot in the Harrier, that is for sure. It is probably one of the lesser survivable aircraft, especially when compared to the F-18, even in missions that I create where I know where all the threats are going to be and all this kind of stuff. So that's why I haven't, unfortunately, been posting many Harrier multiplayer videos. It's not very fun to watch the host get killed all the time, right? So I've been looking high and low, under rocks, in manuals, in YouTube videos, like I said before, to figure out and devise a new technique in order to make the Harrier a lot more survivable. And we're going to do this by increasing our standoff distance while using IRMAVs. This technique uses 3 different systems, all in conjunction with each other, so please be very familiar with how to use IRMAVs, as well as how to use the targeting pod and your INS systems in the Harrier before you try this technique, or it's really just going to frustrate you. So this is kind of like an advanced Harrier pilot video here. So what we're going to be doing is basically we're going to be selecting a point on the ground where, say, a tank is. With our targeting pod, we're going to pass that information to our INS system, and then, once again, the INS system is going to hand that information off to the sensor of the Maverick, and hopefully those systems will all talk to each other correctly, and we'll get a good beat on the target, and we'll be able to launch our missile. Now, this technique is a little bit buggy. It works probably 85 to 90% of the time. It doesn't work every single time, and that is not Rosbomb's fault. It is because the integration of the targeting pod on the real AV-8B is not perfect. The Marine Corps didn't really realize how long the Harrier was going to be in service for. They didn't realize how long it was going to take for the F-35B to come online and start replacing Harriers in the fleet. And so as a result, they wanted to squeeze as much capability out of the Harrier as possible. And by bolting on a targeting pod in a very similar fashion to the way the Lantern pod was integrated into the F-14, they were able to squeeze out some more capability. So as a result of that, due to limitations with the architecture of the aircraft's systems, budgetary concerns, architecture of the targeting pod itself, things don't talk to each other 100% well, and things can be a little bit buggy. And that's going to be the same way in the real jet as well. So, without further ado, we'll go ahead and we will step on into the office and we'll get started. So, here we are doing a lazy orbit over the town of Rachel, probably breaking a whole lot of noise abatement procedures, but that's neither here nor there. So we'll go ahead and we will push on up towards waypoint 2, which is going to be our targeting waypoint. We have a simulated armored battalion out there with some old rusted out M60 patent tanks out there on range 74 Bravo, which is actually the mock Soviet airfield range. Very cool little range. I think it's very good for practicing air-to-ground ordnance drops. It's in a very nice little valley bowl, so it's very easy to find visually, as well as you have that nice kind of whitish chalk layout of that Soviet airfield. So we'll make sure we stay good and north so that we do not break the box and piss off the Air Force. We'll go ahead and fly almost due west. At 260. We shall go ahead and make sure our target pod is ready to go. We're going to put it in FLIR. Slave our TDC. Ground mode. I'll leave it at nav for now so that we can find our target. So an easy way to make sure you get your targeting pod or even your DMT onto your target as quickly as possible is to make sure you designate your targeting waypoint down here and tell the aircraft's weapon systems and the INS that, hey, waypoint 2, that's where our target is. And so that'll make it a lot easier to slew your sensors over there. So we'll give ourselves a nice standoff distance. This technique is all about giving yourself standoff distance as well as allowing you to find targets and designate targets with your targeting pod, pass those to the INS, and in turn pass those to the Maverick seeker head with a 360-degree field of view. You'll notice that we're not carrying a gun pod on our Harrier, and that is simply because the gun pod fairings are liable to mask our targeting pod a lot worse than the simple aerodynamic fairings that are on there now. A lot of times, Harriers will work in pairs in combat, one being the hunter and the other being the killer. The hunter with the targeting pod will not have a gun pod on that jet, and that is to decrease the masking of the targeting pod, like I said earlier. And that is actually true of a lot of different jets. Targeting pods are a lot more scarce in inventories than a lot of people tend to think, and that is simply a factor of they're expensive, they are finicky, they break a lot, they require a lot of maintenance, that kind of stuff. So a lot of times jets will work in a hunter-killer kind of pairing. So our target is down in that valley, so we'll go ahead and we'll roll on into that target and we'll designate it with our targeting pod. Alrighty, and we'll go ahead and take our targeting pod out of standby and move our TDC to put our targeting pod on the target, and we can see we are right on top of our field of armor out there. And we'll go ahead and we'll select our first victim. We'll go ahead and go to our stores page, make sure it was on already, whoops. So we'll make sure our master arm is on. We'll select an IRMAV, and as of the new open beta update, we can actually step through our different missiles, which is a very nice feature that I was definitely looking forward to. So thanks a lot for that, Rusbomb. And we'll go ahead and roll on in down the valley here. And zoom on in. I'll do our tank. And we'll go ahead and give it a pause. So, like I said earlier, we are designating a point on the ground with our targeting pod with the camera through the crosshair here. And then that point on the ground that just happens to have a tank there is being passed along to the INS system of the jet itself, and then in turn that INS system is going to pass that off to the seeker head of the Maverick and tell that system where to go. So uncage our Maverick, we will increase the FOV, and we'll go ahead and pause it again. So here we go, we've got our Maverick format page up, and if we zoom in, we can see that that little spot on the ground, that land there, is the same tank that we have designated here. We'll go ahead and sweeten up that picture a little bit on our way into the target a little bit more, and we'll bring that crosshair across over onto that tank a little bit better. Once we break 10 nautical miles from our target, we will go ahead and we will push sensor select switch up, and then very quickly after that we will go ahead and tap our TDC down or depress, and that way we're telling our Maverick go ahead and lock up any contrast that you're seeing. And it will hopefully go ahead and lock up that tank. Once we have that tank locked up, we'll fire our missile, and then we'll go ahead and crank it off the target and release some flares and make sure that we don't have any man pads, any SA-8s, or any other kind of mobile air defense systems along with this armored column coming up after us. So we'll go ahead and we'll go and do it. So sweeten up that picture a little bit. And now we've got that tank right in our crosshairs of our Maverick. Coming up on 10 nautical miles. Make sure our FOV is in fact zoom in. It is. Alright, sensor select switch up, depress, and rifle. And we'll go ahead and crank it, put some flares out, put some chaff out, and we'll go ahead and keep our belly up a little bit in order to get some real-time BDA from our targeting pod. And we're flying perpendicular from our target now, and that is very important. As I've said in my videos in the past, if you're flying dead on onto a SAM system, whether it's a MANPAD, an SA-8, a TOR, whatever it is, any kind of missile, the principle is the same. If you're flying head on, you're giving that missile an advantage, an energy advantage, because it doesn't have to fly an intercept vector. It just is simply flying a straight line at you. If you're flying perpendicular to your target area and they launch a SAM, that SAM is going to have to either follow you or fly an intercept vector to you, thus decreasing its energy potential and decreasing its kinetic energy, and making it easier to spoof with ECM, with chaff or flares, or simply just avoiding it through maneuvering your own jet, which has a higher G pulling potential in terms of a tighter turn than the missile itself, because it's moving at a much faster speed. So we'll see what that missile is up to. Just flying in towards our armored column. Just giving a nice lazy turn, making sure we've got our eyes on the target. Sweeten that picture up again so we can really see it well. Missile's starting to dive in on our tank. And there's a shack. Good shack. One tank is dead. And we'll go ahead and zoom on back out. And we'll go ahead and pick our next victim. Let's go ahead and go after this guy here. And another cool feature of this technique is we can select our target just like that while we're flying away from the target area, while we're increasing our standoff distance, and thus making it harder for some sort of air defense system to intercept us. And thus, of course, increasing our survivability. So we'll come on back in towards our target, keeping our speed up. Rolling in our target from a different heading, very important, not only for survivability's sake, but also the sake of making sure our target is not masked by smoke from that second missile. And rifle again. Cranking off that target, put out some flares. And we'll keep our belly up a bit in a nice lazy turn just for the sake of the video so we can get some real-time BDA on our missile. And we can see the fire out there from that first tank we killed. And you'll notice just how quickly I'm staying sensor select switch up, putting our Maverick into IRMAV, giving authority to that missile, seeker head, and then depressing TDC very quickly after that. If you don't press TDC quickly after that, the missile seeker head will probably go stupid and it won't lock up something, and you'll have to start this process all over again. Like I said, sometimes that just happens as a result of just the things not being integrated as tightly and neatly as they would be in like the A10C. But I digress. It works 90% of the time. And it's a really good way to increase your standoff distance from the target in the Harrier here, as well as allow you to look and seek for targets without being flying directly head on to your target, as you would have to be if looking for targets with the seeker head of the Maverick. Now keep in mind you can also use this technique with the DMT, however that is not an all-weather system because it has no IR camera to it. Go ahead and unmask our targeting pod, and we'll go ahead and we will select our next victim. And the technique works basically the same, except no targeting pod. So we'll go ahead and roll on back in. Nice and rebalanced out now that we've got our two outboard Mavericks off of the jet. Coming up on 10 miles. Got a good picture. We'll go ahead and uncage our Maverick, zoom it on in. Sensor select up, TDC in, and rifle, and crank. We'll go ahead and look for any SAMs. We're good. Go ahead and fly perpendicular to the target area. Fly a little bit smoother than I would like to in a real combat situation, but that is simply so that we can get a very cool shot of a missile blowing up a tank here. There goes the missile. Streaking into his target. And we went ahead and shacked another tank. Perfect. So, while we've got the targeting pod unmasked, we'll go ahead and zoom her on back out, and we shall select another victim. So we'll go ahead and go after this. I believe that's actually a radar, not a tank, but it works. We'll go ahead and roll ourselves back on in. We'll pre-zoom our targeting pod a little bit. Gain a little bit of altitude, give our seeker head a little bit of a better angle on that target. Alrighty, there's our armored vehicle. Maybe that is a tank. I don't think that is a radar. Yep, that's a tank. Alright, uncage our Maverick. Sure it's FOV zoomed in. We're definitely within range, so we'll go ahead and the sensor select up, press TDC, and rifle 4. Crank off the target, get some flares out there, get some chaff out there. And we'll go ahead and enter a shallow climbing turn in order to not mask our pods so that we can get some more real-time BDA and get a cool shot. There goes our Maverick. Looks like we're going after that tank right there. And Shack 4. 4 tanks destroyed, 4 missiles off the rails, and we're good to go ahead and go on home, back to home plate. So, like I said before, please be very intimately familiar with the workings of the targeting pod, the INS system, and your IRMAVs before you try this out for yourself, or you may get very frustrated and you may be like, Spud, I can't do it. It just requires some patience, a good amount of practice to get it to work, and you'll be golden. This technique worked really well for standoff distance from heavily defended targets like what we just practiced here, but I believe it can also be quite good at going after, say, you've got troops in contact, you've got a TIC going, and you need to really make sure you're identifying your targets really well. You can use the nice zoom feature of the targeting pod to make sure you are targeting the correct enemies on the ground and make sure you're not accidentally going to have a blue on blue situation. You know, any kind of thing like that where you need to really positively identify your target or have a nice good zoom lens in order to look at that target. And then simply, just like we did before in the video, pass that location to your INS, INS to your Maverick seeker head, sensor select switch up, very quickly depress TDC, have that Maverick lock on, hopefully it does and the seeker head doesn't go stupid. Rifle that missile off real quick, crank off your target, put some flares out there, and you are good to go. So I hope you guys liked this video. I hope you guys try this technique. I haven't found anything or any sources out there, no YouTube videos of real Harrier pilots, any stories of real Harrier pilots doing this. So I don't know if this technique is used in real life. However, in DCS world, we have the luxury of being able to try new things and break rules and regulations that you wouldn't be able to break in real life and just mess with things. So I hope you guys have fun with this, and happy tank blinking. Enjoy this awesome simulator, guys. Have a good one, and fly safe.